Welcome to the CAL FIRE Harvest Document Training. This video is designed to define CAL FIRE's forest practice jurisdiction, which determines when a harvest document is required, and to communicate the resources available to decide which harvest document is the best fit. The Forest Practice Act was created by the state's legislature, and the Forest Practice Rules are created by the State Board of Forestry. They are collectively known as the Forest Practice Rules and are enforced by CAL FIRE. The Forest Practice Rules define CAL FIRE's forest practice jurisdiction. This training is not meant to be exhaustive in nature, nor is it meant to replace more formal trainings specific to forest practice enforcement issues. The goal of this video is to provide a general overview such that resource management staff, as well as private RPFs, are able to confidently provide consistent and accurate information to the public and other stakeholders. CAL FIRE has permitting and enforcement jurisdiction over activities defined as timber operations on areas defined as timberland in the state of California. Timberland is defined in the Forest Practice Rules. There is no minimum acreage threshold for land to be considered timberland. Timberland means land other than land owned by the federal government and land designated by the board as experimental forest land, which is available for and capable of growing a crop of trees of a commercial species used to produce lumber and other forest products, including Christmas trees. We will discuss commercial species soon, but first, let's delve a little further into what available for and capable of mean. Available for refers to the feasibility of commercial aspects. Though a single tree can be considered a crop, if it is infeasible to remove the single tree in a commercial manner, the definition may not be met. A single tree needing to be removed by a tree service in pieces as it is hanging over a home may not be a commercially viable harvest. The availability of a piece of land can change throughout time. Capable of. This includes the physical characteristics of the land. Is the site class 1 through 4? Does the ground have enough soil, water, sunlight, etc., to be capable of growing a crop of trees? Typically, the capability does not change throughout time. As with any set of rules, they are written in black and white. The natural world is rarely black and white. The definition of timberland clearly dictates many areas which obviously are or obviously are not timberland. The definition also brings to light many gray areas. The purpose of this training is not to tell you what to do if a gray area is encountered, but to inform you that gray areas exist. When gray area questions arise, CAL FIRE relies upon unit foresters to use their discretion in these matters. If you run into a question where you are unable to provide a clear, black and white answer, please route the questions through your CAL FIRE unit forester or regional review team chair. The definition of timberland is contingent upon growing a crop of trees of a commercial species. Commercial species are defined in the Forest Practice Rules, which lists species that are commercial for each forest district. Commercial species means those species found in Group A and those in Group B that are found on lands where the species in Group A are now growing naturally or have grown naturally in the recorded past. There are some species which overlap and are listed in all forest districts, and some species that are only listed in 1 or 2 districts. This video doesn't go into individual species identification. The item to note here is that commercial species vary by forest district. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the species in the district you work and how to identify them before answering any questions concerning CAL FIRE jurisdiction. The final point of clarification within the definition of timberland is for what constitutes a crop of trees. The forest practice rules define crop of trees as any number of trees which can be harvested commercially. For clarity, any number includes the number 1. This will be especially important later in the video when we talk about timberland conversion. Now that we have a clear understanding of what constitutes timberland, let's delve into the second requirement needed to activate CAL FIRE's forest practice jurisdiction: timber operations. We will describe timber operations by itemizing the subsections it is defined by: A1, A2, and B, the timber operations, the commercial purposes, and the fire break or fuel break portion. Timber operations is defined in the forest practice rules. The first part of the definition is essentially the typical logging activities one thinks about for a harvesting operation. A1, timber operations, means the cutting or removal, or both, of timber or other solid wood forest products, including Christmas trees, from timberlands for commercial purposes, together with all the incidental work, including but not limited to construction and maintenance of roads, fuel breaks, fire breaks, stream crossings, landings, skid trails, and the beds for falling of trees, fire hazard abatement, and site preparation that involves disturbance of soils or burning of vegetation following timber harvesting activities, but excluding preparatory work such as tree marking, surveying, or road flagging. The second part of the definition of timber operations is commercial purposes, which has 2 parts, A and B. Commercial purposes includes A, the cutting or removal of trees that are processed into logs, lumber, or other wood products and offered for sale, barter, exchange, or trade. Or B, the cutting or removal of trees or other forest products during the conversion of timberlands to land uses other than the growing of timber that are subject to the provisions of Section 4621, including but not limited to residential or commercial developments, production of other agricultural crops, recreational developments, ski developments, water development projects, and transportation projects. The most common commercial purpose is selling a log to a mill. However, the definition includes barter, exchange, or trade. These definitions include services. For example, asking someone to remove trees from your property as a service and saying you're not going to pay them, but they can keep the trees they remove would qualify as commercial purposes. The B part of the definition, as it relates to conversion of timberlands, can be a difficult concept. Timberland conversions may include cutting or removing trees for agricultural purposes, such as cannabis cultivation and vineyard production, or to build or expand a house, outbuilding, or road. Timberland conversions require a harvest document from CAL FIRE. If timberland is converted without a harvest document, the responsible party is in violation of the forest practice rules and will be issued a notice of violation and may be assessed a financial penalty of up to $10,000 per count. To reiterate the main point here, if you are cutting or removing trees to devote timberland to another use, even if you are not selling the wood, you may need a harvest document. Later in the video, we will discuss types of harvest documents available for timberland conversion. We have covered the most commonly used or applied portion of the definition of timber operations. The last section relates to fire breaks or fuel breaks. This portion of the definition dictates that timber operations do not occur if very specific requirements are met related to fire breaks and fuel breaks. This portion of the rules is not applied frequently. This video will not go into detail describing the list of specific requirements. The take-home message is that there is an option for certain activities to qualify as not constituting as timber operations if certain criteria are met. If you think these conditions may apply, please read through the section in the Forest Practice Rules thoroughly before proceeding or giving direction. Now that we have a clear understanding of what conditions must be met for CAL FIRE to have jurisdiction, again, that is timber operations being conducted on timberland, let's clarify a few things before we discuss harvest document options. There are many misconceptions. This list is not exhaustive, but does cover some very common issues. Misconception number 1. Land is only timberland if it is zoned Timberland Production Zone, or TPZ. This statement is incorrect. Timberlands are defined by their physical characteristics rather than their zoning. Land zoned commercial, residential, etc. may be considered timberland if the physical characteristics are met. Misconception number 2. An activity is only subject to the forest practice rules if the trees being cut or removed are going to be sold. This statement is incorrect. The commercial purposes of the cutting and removal may be either an intent to sell, barter, exchange, or trade the timber, or an intent to convert timberland to a use other than growing timber, whether or not there is any intent to commercialize the timber. Misconception number 3. Activities are not subject to the forest practice rules if the tree is small. This statement is incorrect. The size of the tree does not constrain the definition of timberlands or timber operations. Land on which a single qualifying seedling is growing may be considered timberland. Misconception number 4. Activities are not subject to the forest practice rules if the tree is dead or burned. This statement is incorrect. The condition of the tree does not constrain the definition of timber operations or timberland. Cutting or removing dead or burned trees for commercial purposes still qualifies as conducting timber operations on timberland. You now should have a firm understanding of timberland and timber operations. When these conditions are met, CAL FIRE has jurisdiction. If timber operations are proposed to be conducted on timberland, a harvest document accepted by CAL FIRE must be obtained prior to starting timber operations. There are 3 main categories, so to speak, of harvest document options. This video will discuss the main categories, but will not provide an exhaustive description of each harvest document option. The takeaway message is that there are many options. Project size, complexity, and purpose will determine which one is the best fit. Timber harvesting plans, or THPs, and THP similar documents, non-industrial timber management plans, programmatic timber harvesting plans, modified THPs, and working forest management plans, require a registered professional forester, or RPF, and are discretionary documents, meaning there is a formal review process with a back and forth between review agencies and the RPF. These types of harvest documents require the highest level of analysis. As these documents are discretionary and oftentimes involve the field inspection prior to approval, there is the option for an RPF to propose activities which deviate from the rules, so long as there is a site-specific reason, justification, or mitigation measure proposed to and agreed upon by the reviewing agencies. These harvest documents provide the option for the highest level of flexibility within the rules. This also means the approval process is the most lengthy of all the harvest document options. For THPs, the approval process takes a minimum of 15 days, and in some cases may take much longer. Each of the THP type documents have differing lifespans for which they are valid. Some last in perpetuity. For THPs specifically, they are valid for 5 years with an option to extend to 7 years if certain criteria are met. These harvest document options are lumped together for the purposes of this overview video, even though they have differing criteria and processes. If unfamiliar with these options, thoroughly review the forest practice rules prior to giving advice or information to interested parties. The next harvest document category is emergency notices, for which an RPF is required. This is a streamlined option designed specifically for situations in which an emergency has occurred, necessitating a timely start of timber operations. Emergency notices require a declaration by the RPF made under penalty of perjury that a bona fide emergency exists, which requires emergency timber operations. Emergency notices are non-discretionary documents, meaning they are either accepted upon receipt as being complete or are returned for being incomplete. There is no review back and forth process. Timber operations may commence upon acceptance of the emergency notice by CAL FIRE or after 5 days from receipt if no return letter is issued. These harvest documents are valid for 1 year and must comply with all operational provisions of the forest practice rules. There is no flexibility unless very specific conditions are met. The final category of harvest document is exemptions. Some, but not all exemptions require an RPF. By definition, exemptions are pre-identified projects of limited scope that, due to their nature, are exempt from the plan preparation, completion, and stocking requirements. Each exemption document is for a specific circumstance. Similar to emergency notices, exemptions are also non-discretionary documents, having no back and forth review process. They are either accepted as complete or returned for being incomplete. Operations may commence upon acceptance of the exemption as valid by CAL FIRE or after the required waiting period if no return letter is issued. These harvest documents are valid for 1 year and must comply with all operational provisions of the forest practice rules. There is no flexibility within the forest practice rules for exemptions. The final harvest topic to discuss is timberland conversion. There are multiple ways to propose this work, and as such, conversions don't specifically fit under any one group. The conversion of timberland can be undertaken in 2 main ways, either through the full timberland conversion process, or, if specific criteria are met, through an exemption to the full process. If the specific exemption criteria are not met, the full process involves utilizing a timber harvesting plan, THP, applying for and being issued a timberland conversion permit, TCP, as well as demonstrating proof of CEQA compliance. Per PRC 4622, an often overlooked caveat to the rules is that the only time an RPF is not required for timber harvesting plan preparation is when accompanied by the submission of a timberland conversion permit. If certain criteria are met, a project may be eligible for one of the exemptions: a less than 3 acre conversion exemption, a subdivision conversion exemption, or a utility right-of-way exemption. This video will not go over all the specific requirements for a project to qualify for one of the 3 exemptions. The takeaway message is that exemptions to the full timberland conversion process do exist. There are specific criteria which must be met for each exemption. If these criteria are not met, then the only way to proceed with timberland conversion is to go through the full timberland conversion process, regardless of the size of the project. We have discussed the definitions of timberland and timber operations, defining what conditions must be met for activities to fall under CAL FIRE's jurisdiction. We have clarified some common misconceptions and provided an overview of harvest document options. Now, let's take a look at some of the resources available to you. A pocket guide card has been provided to you as part of this video. It can also be downloaded from CAL FIRE's website. The guide card is designed to provide clear direction for the majority of questions concerning the need or lack of need of a harvest document accepted by CAL FIRE. The back side of the card walks through the specific requirements of less than 3-acre conversion exemptions. The guide card was not designed to give definitive answers to gray area issues, but is designed to give clear and accurate answers for most circumstances. As discussed earlier in this video, when unique or gray area questions come up, CAL FIRE recommends you direct those questions to the CAL FIRE Unit Forester. There are many resources available online. We'll go over a few of the main ones located on the Board of Forestry and CAL FIRE's websites. The QR codes at the bottom of the guide card are linked to the most common resource pages. On the Board of Forestry website, you can find a variety of informative resources. A helpful tool to learn or to educate about exemption options and the specific requirements of each is the Dead Tree Removal and Fuel Reduction Permit Chart. The pamphlet is not exhaustive, but does give a good overview of most harvest document options and the main differences in requirements for each. Another helpful tool is the current list of RPFs who have elected to have their contact information posted as consultants. Finally, the current, proposed new, and old copies of the Forest Practice Rules are posted on the board's website. Now let's look at some of the resources available on CAL FIRE's website. Blank harvest documents and routing information for each forest district, and a link to the CalTrees website for viewing and submitting harvest documents. This video was designed to specifically address CAL FIRE jurisdiction, but please remember, there are additional regulations which apply to timberland in California. City and county ordinances and other state agencies, such as Water Quality Control Boards and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, regulations exist and may also apply. The Resources tab on the CAL FIRE Forest Practice website provides links to learn more about additional regulations. Please review the information and resources available. If you have further questions, reach out to a local forest practice inspector, unit forester, or regional review team member. This concludes the video. Thank you for spending the time to learn and/or refresh your knowledge of CAL FIRE's forest practice jurisdiction.